how's everybody doing? Yes. So now I know why in Bollywood you have these people breaking into song and dance. Because they're having turmeric and ginger combined with pepper in the food. It makes you want to move. Okay, all right. So thank you for the invitation to speak over here, and nice to see everyone. Everybody's having a good time? Yes? Okay. Yes? All right. My girlfriend said, what do you call the last speaker? Is that the keynote speaker? And I'm like, no, that's the first speaker. She says, oh no, then you're the headliner. And the problem is that Shane was already much more funnier than I can ever be in my life. So I'm going to try my best. So, all right, so I'm going to talk about the environmental consequences of animal agriculture, the mechanisms and global impact. So we're going to talk about planetary health, all right? My name is Dr. Tushar Mehta. I'm trained as a family doctor. I do emergency medicine mainly. I do some international health stuff. I've spent, every year I used to spend a month in India, working in rural India, and now I'm working with a project in Haiti. I'm interested in ecological issues and evidence-based medicine in terms of plant, diet, and health. I'm interested in those things as well. In fact, they mentioned that I keep a very good reference list that I love to share with everybody. So, trying to feed each other the articles that are the most important articles and make them easily accessible so that people don't have to spend tons and tons of time. I can do some of the boring stuff for you. Conflicts of interest, I did buy this $400 thing for Kale United, came out. I think it went down. I don't know, but I didn't. I did not invest in Beyond Meat, unfortunately. Yeah. All right. So I apologize that my slides are not as pretty, and that also my presentation might be a bit sad. But there's a reason for it. We're going to talk about the environmental consequences of animal agriculture. All right. So we're going to talk some basic principles. My goal in this talk is to talk about some of the basic principles and mechanisms by which these things happen. Why animal agriculture versus plant agriculture? Why animal agriculture has a negative impact on planetary health, on the environment. And I'm going to tell the story largely through numbers, okay? Numbers and their meaning. And also that we'll look at agriculture in the context of other environmental ecological parameters, right? Credit to a study, sorry, not a study, but a publication by the United Nations, UNEPA, United Nations Environmental Protection Agency, okay, called Livestock's Long Shadow in 2006. This was a big, big report that first came out and really blew the whole topic wide open for governments and big institutions. This was a huge publication that talked about the environmental impact of animal agriculture. It was a big eye-opener for me. Later on, a movie came out which blew this open more for the public and also for other organizations that are more public-facing, and that was the movie called Cowspiracy. I don't agree with every statistic in the movie Cowspiracy, but it is actually very, very good. Okay, most of it is very bang on. So let's talk about the world population. David Jenkins isn't here anymore, but does 1% growth sound like a lot? Does it sound like a lot? Is that such a bad thing, 1% growth? Because the world is growing about 1% population growth, okay? But right now we have about 7.5 billion people on the Earth. And 1% growth means we add 1 billion people to the Earth every 10 to 12 years. Let's say it's more around 12 years right now, but once we get to 8 billion people and 9 billion people, that 1% growth means that in 10 years we add 1 billion people to the Earth. And that's huge. That has a huge impact on everything. If you do math on anything, if you just see what if somebody consumed something that weighed 10 grams? But if you multiply 10 grams by, let's say, the adult population of the world, 5 billion people, what's 10 grams times 5 billion people? So let's say they consume that 10 grams once a week of something. Then you see how much numbers add up. And it's hard to conceive of numbers, and sometimes we just don't do the basic arithmetic of things. So that's a lot of growth. And we talk about this is a laser pointer here, right? We talk about 1,000 years ago, we were 250 million people estimated on the planet, and we sort of slowly grew till about the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution. It got faster, Thomas Malthus was mentioned, and now it's growing like this, okay? So this is a big deal for a lot of reasons, and unfortunately people don't speak about this topic with a lot of common sense or with a lot of compassion. Unfortunately, people say a lot of uncompassionate things when it comes to this, and the solutions and like that, we'll talk about that later if there's time. But let's look at more. There's, according to Oxfam, there's 700 million, more than 700 million people living on less than, $2 a day. That's the global definition of extreme poverty, okay? 113 million people affected by food shortages, 74 million people affected by conflict and war, 40 million slaves, according to modern definitions of slavery, and a more moderate level of poverty. If you look at that definition, it's $4.2 billion. That's purchasing power parity, okay? So they may earn a little bit more or less than that, but they can purchase sort of the equivalent of that, that value of money, on a global average, okay? And in terms of billionaires, there's an exceedingly rapid growth of billionaires on the planet, but it's not just billionaires. It's not just billionaires. There's a lot of people who are pretty rich, and that rich class is actually growing faster than ever, while the rest of the world is kind of stagnating, and the planet that they live on is going to stagnate. 82% of new wealth created goes to the global 1%. It's not hard to make the definition of global 1%. That it actually isn't as much money as you think. Probably a lot of us are part of the global 1%, because other people are so poor. And the scale of things that are changing on the earth. Again, let's talk about numbers. Let's look at the scale of things. We don't imagine environmental problems just in the scale of the bigger issue. 75% of land-based environment on the earth is altered by humans to some degree, some more, some less, but there's very little pristine environment left. 2/3 of the marine environment has been significantly altered. The numbers you will see in some slides may be a little bit different, but that's because different sources calculate the numbers a little bit differently, so don't worry about that. 3/4 of all freshwater systems are now devoted to crop and livestock use. I'm going to talk about that more. 300% increase in crop production since 1970, all right? Plant biomass. When you look at the biomass of all living things on Earth, the mass of all living things on Earth, how much mass is there? Humans have cut that mass in half because the biggest amount of that mass was actually trees. And also in soil and things like that. When you cut the trees, a lot of this stuff, the trees are burnt or they decompose, they turn into carbon dioxide, which is released into the atmosphere. It's part of our climate change problem. Same with the soil. But we've reduced the biomass, the living biomass, by half. Net primary production means everything that grows on Earth by photosynthesis. When the sun shines on Earth, green things grow. Humans control 1/4 of the net primary production. That's massive compared to any species doing anything on Earth. Agriculture occupies 40 to 50% of the non-frozen surface of the Earth. And despite all of this reduction in trees and everything like that, timber harvest has increased by 45% since 1970. Now I know some other speakers will always say, hey, there's all this bad news, but there's some good news. But really, if you look at the stats, the news ain't that good. I'm sorry to say that, but I'm just talking about what is. Okay. So what does all this have to do with plant versus animal-based foods? Let's again look at some basic principles. How are animals fed? Animals are fed in 2 ways. One, they are fed feed. We grow things and we feed it to them. Grains, soy, and oil seeds. Oil seeds are basically squeezed out of whatever flax seeds and peanuts and canola and whatever. You squeeze that stuff, but then the stuff that the stuff over, you feed it to animals. Okay, so we grow these oil seeds. And grazing. We graze animals, they get to eat grass, which is supposedly natural. But the thing is that it isn't quite natural because what we've done is we've cut down the forest to create pasture, and then they're going to graze on that pasture. So we've converted natural land into a grazing land, and even if they graze on something that was naturally a grassland, it changes that land. Okay? There's something called a feed conversion ratio. It's a very, very important concept. How much do you have to feed a living animal, human, whatever, to gain growth of that? When we feed our baby, when we feed ourselves, if I eat a kilogram of protein, does that mean I gain a kilogram of muscle? No. We metabolize a lot of that protein and all that, and then part of it may be used to grow my muscle or grow me. Let's say if I'm a growing child or a growing person, or if I'm working out, but there's, a lot of it's just used up as energy, the protein. So how much do you have to feed to get back into the flesh of an animal in terms of protein, in terms of calories? I've just included protein here. But, it can be a lot. For a pound of, let's say, cow flesh, it may take 10 to 18 kilograms, maybe more, depending on that cow and the situation it's grown in, to get a kilogram of muscle mass back from that cow that somebody might eat. Now, the most efficient are things like are animals like chicken, and also protein from eggs and milk can be kind of efficient as well. Now, there's different ways of calculating this, so you see different numbers and there's different situations. So, but it's around there. Now, when you think of farmed fish, it's around the same. When you look at the statistics about farmed fish, it's still 3 to 4 kilograms of feed to get that back. And people think insects like grow out of thin air or something. No, insects must be fed. If you feed them in a test tube, they might be efficient, but when you have a mass of insects, you look at them, you study them, then they act like more like a bigger organism. They're burning more calories and more of them die in the process. You know, they're crawling over each other. When you're farming insects on a bigger scale, they're less efficient. It's about chicken scale, that we're sort of getting there. And organic farming, people think, hey, we're going to do organic farming or with animals or grazing animals, that requires exponentially more feed. Because these animals are not just in their little cell. They're moving around. They're burning calories. They're fed food that's less efficient, maybe better for them, maybe more enjoyable to them, but it's less efficient and it takes much more land and much more calories. Okay? So it's a fundamental issue of less efficiency. You're feeding them a certain amount of protein and you're getting a less amount of protein back. Therefore, it takes more land. It takes more water. You're going to end up using more soil, more pesticides, antibiotics, fertilizers, everything. You need all of that stuff. Now we're talking about land animals, we're talking about fish a bit later. Okay? You need more. So terrestrial livestock, so livestock on land. So chickens, all different kinds of birds, ruminants, you know, goats, sheep, buffaloes, cows, cattle, you know. There's about 70 billion land animals slaughtered per year. Shane, you were saying that Trump doesn't know what a trillion is. He said something about it, you know. People don't even know what a billion is. A billion is hard to imagine. What is a billion? You know, I find it hard to imagine. I studied a lot of math back in the day. Can't remember, you know, it's a hard number to get your head around, but that amounts to 2,000 animals slaughtered per second if you average it over the year. Okay? 2,000 animals per second. I mean, that just sort of tells you something, right? Mostly chickens, but a lot of other animals too. Now, there's terrestrial livestock divided into monogastric, one stomach, chickens, pigs, birds, okay? They eat grain, soy, oilseeds. They must be fed feed. There's ruminants who could also be fed animal feed, but they can also graze. Okay, so there's the two different kinds of feeding practice for these two different types of classes of animals. Now, how do you make an animal more efficient? How do you get this animal to grow? Like, you know, you feed 3 to 4 kilograms of protein and you get like 1 kilogram back. That's actually highly efficient. Humans aren't that efficient. And it turns out that natural animals aren't that efficient either. But we've bred animals for, you know, centuries to make them more and more and more efficient in the process of domestication, right? And if you look at this, you know, these species of chicken, 1957, it would take like, you know, maybe 18 weeks to get this chicken to like 900 grams. But then it takes a shorter time in 1978, and now it just takes, you know, within a couple of months, in 2005, you get, you know, 4 kilograms. These species has been bred and bred and bred, and now we're using direct gene modification. We're hitting sort of a plateau. Like, you can only go so far. So if you look at the statistics year by year, how fast and how much these animals can grow, chickens especially, because they're the sort of the hallmark of our human genetic engineering, breeding is a form of genetic engineering, that we can get, you know, in the last decade, you get these very small increments of greater efficiency, not that much. We're hitting sort of a plateau. There's a biological sort of limit that we're getting to, you know, maybe we can do something, but this is in factory farms, okay? You're gonna do that in a factory farm. You need a genetically modified animal for breeding and all this kind of stuff, and you need to feed them antibiotics. You need to control the temperature. You need to keep the lights on. You need to restrict their movement so they do not burn any calories. You need to make it as horrible as possible to get the maximum efficiency that you can, okay? And that makes them actually more eco-friendly than organic animals that are running around because they take less resources, and resource consumption is the biggest issue, actually. So as I mentioned, non-frozen surface Earth, you know, humans have altered 75% of the Earth to varying degrees. 40 to 50% of that is used for agriculture. You know, again, the sources and the year the source was published and the type of satellite imagery and calculations that they use to make that, and give you some little variation there. But 30 to 40% of the Earth's non-frozen surface is used for animal agriculture. That's a huge amount for animal agriculture, a huge amount of land. Okay? When you're flying in a plane and you look down and you see farms, we mostly see farms. That's what we mostly see, and that's mostly for animals. Okay? And Now, grazing is the biggest use, because I said it's more efficient, right? And so, and a quarter of grazing land is extensively grazed. It's in trouble. We'll talk about that more. Now, only 10 to 15% of the Earth's surface is used for growing crops, but 50% of all those crops are fed to animals. So the grazing land plus the crop land that's fed to animal, that adds to that 30–40%. Okay, and only 5 to 10% of the Earth's surface is used to grow crops that are directly fed to humans. So it's a very small portion that we actually directly feed from. It's actually very small compared to the total amount of land. And interestingly, there's one study that shows that it talks about only 40% of the world's protein comes from animal agriculture. 60% comes from this very small amount of land where we grow plants, plant foods for people, which are actually healthier, right? Now the numbers vary depending on the source. That's why I got those ranges there. All right. This is just a 2010 United Nations publication that was really good. It's getting a little bit dated, but this column here is land use, like all the different industries. These are different kinds of industries that we use that draw most of our resources. That land use, this thing here is the biggest industry in the world, animal agriculture, that uses land. Okay, and this is crops. Okay, all right. So I'm not sure like if part of that crops is fed to animals or if the crops for animals are included here, but it doesn't matter. You get the picture. All right. And in terms of global warming potential, it's marked over here, 2010. They said it's whatever at that time you're saying it's like between 14–18%, something like that. Okay, rainforest destruction. That's why rainforest destruction of the Amazon. The main reason is that we're grazing animals, or that we're growing soy to feed the animals. Now we always hear about the Amazon, but there's other rainforests in Latin America, the Americas. Also in Africa. A lot of the world's remaining rainforests are in Africa, the Congo Basin, and other places like that. Again, animal agriculture is destroying them very quickly. And there's more people eating more meat. And temperate areas as well. 70% of the surface area of the United States is used for animal agriculture. Can you believe that? 70% of the continental US, not Alaska. That's huge. And Canada too. Canada, a lot of it is trees, but the southern border is warmer. A lot of when you fly in a plane, you see farms. Most of those farms are growing food for probably animals. Right. So land use equals ecosystem destruction, disruption. We're destroying the pre-existing environment. We're completely altering it, then using it for grazing, or we're using it for grain to feed animals. What's my time, by the way? Okay, 10 minutes. Okay. All right, I better move faster. Okay, so it's the largest cause of deforestation, rainforest loss, wetland loss, grassland loss, biodiversity loss. Okay, and forestry and wood paper, that's probably number 2. Okay, we should note that trees are not a renewable resource. This is just in terms of our wood use, because we use a lot of wood. Everybody wants to renovate their house, you're going to buy a bigger house or something like that. So factory farming is more efficient, uses less land, but we have other problems, let's say more animal suffering, antibiotic resistance, other stuff. Grazing uses the most land, but has a even greater biodiversity impact. And there's increased amount of methane released from ruminants that graze and stuff like that, as compared to those that are fed grain. So it's a bigger climate change impact. Grazing and animal agriculture is also the #1 loss of soil worldwide, because when you graze, the animals are eating the grass and whatever very low levels, and then you lose soil, compaction by hooves, all kinds of mechanisms there. You have exposed soil, and you get more erosion. The worst kind of erosion is called desertification, where you have land that's previously fertile and now it's almost like a desert. You can't grow anything. Now, plow-based agriculture, growing crops, growing the foods that we eat as plant-based people, if you're plant-based, then yes, that still causes some erosion, right? But half the crops are fed to animals, and therefore, again, animals make it more, right? That's also different forms of agriculture that can reduce this, right? Now, grazing cattle, goats, sheep, let's see. We talked about that. And soils or waterways. There's animal waste issues, the amount of feces. In North America, 130 times the amount of feces are created by animals as compared to humans. So that's a lot of poop, right? And climate gases. There's CO2 from clearing the forest, all that stuff, or clearing a wetland, or whatever you're doing to convert it into grazing or pasture or farming for animals. But the existing biomass then decomposes or is burnt and is liberated as carbon dioxide. So then you get a lot of CO2 emissions as you increase the farmland or the land for animals, but then you also get methane and nitrous oxide from decomposition from ruminants and other things as well. Now be careful with this guy. This guy has a very slick TED talk, Alan Savory, not a very savory character. this person is, he's kind of some kind of evil person, I don't know. But like, maybe he's a nice guy in real life, but I think so. He's got a lot of pet views, okay? And he talks about how you can do this holistic grazing and save the earth and store carbon in the soil. It's completely bogus. There's no merit to any of his studies, which weren't even really completed, okay? Bogus stuff, sounds good on TED, all right, but it's completely bogus, all right? None of the big publications in the world, big organizations that you're reading about, climate change, nobody even mentions this guy, but he's very much in the minds of people and, influences, government officials probably too, okay? Water use, because we're using more food to feed the animals and growing crops takes water, we're giving a lot of our water to animals and it's not efficient, so we're using a lot of water, okay? So water use for animals, just like the crops, it's part of the waste, right? And we talk about the effects on rainwater, aquifers, rivers, lakes. There's a lot of impact on different water sources. 2010 data, things are probably worse by now, but like there's 50,000 dams, major dams of rivers around the world. 80% of the world population is at threat of water. Major rivers don't even reach the ocean anymore. And freshwaters have lost half their animal population. We're talking about fishes and aquatic animals that live in freshwater. And threats of mass extinction of species dependent on water, fish, birds, and amphibians, plants. We can talk a little bit more about that. So animal agriculture and water pollution, there's nitrogen, phosphorus, and fecal matter that runs off into water, into fresh water, into the ocean, bacteria and parasites, soil erosion into water, reservoirs, and so just highlighting some more of the problems with water. When it comes to climate change, I left climate change down because that's not the most important problem, actually. I don't think it's the most important problem. Biodiversity loss is the most important environmental problem. The taking over of nature is the most important problem. People always talk about climate change, but climate change is a part of this, but it's not the biggest issue when it comes to the environment. But anyways, United Nations updated figures 2014, 14.5% of climate change equivalents, CO2 equivalents are from animal agriculture. But it could be more. There's a previous estimate, and there's other estimates, and there's different ways of calculating. Maybe a bit of political pressure involved in sort of reducing this number a little bit, but it could be more than that too. Okay, but there's the different climate change gases that we mentioned as well. Some of them are sort of quote-unquote short-term, but they're the ones that, like nitrous oxide and methane, if we reduce them, we can have a more rapid impact on slowing climate change, and that's and by reducing animal agriculture. Let's talk about fish. In 1950, they said there's stats about 20 million tons of fish were harvested from the oceans. Okay, 2016, that's 140 million from the ocean, 60 million tons from aquaculture. Okay, and probably a lot of illegal, unregulated, undocumented UII fishing as well. Right? Now, there's an organization called Fish Count UK. They say, okay, with this mass, with the different species of fish, how many fish would that be? And they estimate that could be 7.79 to 2.3 trillion fish per year in 2007 to 2016. Dr. Jenkins had some slides about this. That amounts to 25,000 to 70,000 fish per second. Okay, that's why we're depleting the oceans, because there's a lot of us. And when we decide to eat fish a few times a month or something like that, the numbers add up huge. Okay, farmed fish is not eco-friendly. Okay, they're usually fed ground-up wild fish, and there's other reasons why they're not eco-friendly as well. The genetic engineering, when they escape from their pens and interbreed with wild fish, there's other problems. Industry fishing dominates the eco-certification organization. The sustainable fish thing. The guys who are telling you it's sustainable are the people who are the fish industry themselves, sitting on those things. So don't trust them, okay? It's kind of BS, all right? Good, and there's good studies on fish cognition, memory, social interactions, pain experiences, emotional states. It's an animal that you take into consideration just as much as any other. The WWF Living Planet report talked about, let's talk about that. So populations of fish, birds, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles declined by 52% between 1970 and 2010. Between that time, we wiped out half of all of the vertebrate animals that live above the ocean. Okay, they're like the land animals, birds, and all these kind of reptiles, elephants, everything. We wiped out half. And just in 6 years, maybe like another 6 to 8% are being wiped out. Okay, it's getting faster. And humans plus their livestock, Dr. Jenkins had a slide about this too. There's different studies, one by Vaclav Smil, I think that's the reference that Dr. Jenkins had. But anyways, if you take all livestock and all humans and put them on a scale, and you put all wild terrestrial animals on another scale, all vertebrate terrestrial animals, you'll find that humans plus their livestock outweigh somewhere between 25 to 100 times the amount of all species of wild animals, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of species of vertebrate animals. We outweigh them. That's the amount of our biomass. We're in the Anthropocene. You know, chickens, which are not a natural species, they outweigh all wild birds by 3 or 4 times. So we can appreciate the scale of this thing. You know, so we're in the there's a quaternary extinction period. We're not going to go into that, but you know, humans over time, over thousands of years, did hunt a bunch of species to extinction, right? Then things sort of stabilized, but now what we're getting to the point where again we are causing another stage of extinction, right? Biomass of wild animals, large animals, is 6 times lower than pre-human times, and livestock numbers, which are not wild animals, have increased. Now, of this 362 megafauna species, that is large animals, of the large animals that exist on the earth, we're including marine animals now too, there's a 70% that are in severe decline and 59% at risk of extinction by these things, okay? All right, and hunting is the biggest cause, okay? And habitat loss, as we mentioned. We're in the Anthropocene extinction area. There's 1 million species at threat of extinction out of 11 million total species, and a lot of those are the iconic animals that we love and are dear to us. Multiple causes of this. Animal agriculture is a huge cause, but it's also overpopulation, land fragmentation by roads and human society, materials economy, pollutants, climate change, all these things, urban dwelling, transportation, there's other factors too. So I don't want to say that it's just animal agriculture, it's all of these things combined, but this is playing the biggest role perhaps amongst the other things, and these other things exacerbate each other. So, food security. When we have these number of people, we need to feed people, right? An additional 4 billion people could be fed if land for animal agriculture was converted to crops that would directly feed humans. And when we talk about food justice, we talk about all these foods, soya, grains, everything like that, fed to animals. That makes it more expensive and less accessible for global poor to access these foods. It makes them less accessible. And then we also get conflicts and war that are also exacerbated by climate change, but also by water shortages, food shortages. People fight each other as the populations increase and have less things to eat and less water to get, for their needs. Okay. Food solutions. All right, let's talk about solutions. So plant-based diet is fundamental to these solutions. Okay, because we use so many less resources, we have more available. Remember, biofuels are a big problem. Biofuels use up a lot of crops, and land space that could be devoted otherwise to human food. And also food waste. 30% to 40% of all food is wasted on the earth. Pulses and whole grains are the main replacement for animal protein. Let's put a special plug for pulses. Lauren has some stats, okay? A little bit different than mine, but no problem. You get the scale. They are so efficient compared to the most efficient animal. They also help to fix nitrogen and help other crops grow. They also, 2016 was the United Nations Year of Pulses. They're good for you. They're so good for you. The Three Sisters, Aboriginal traditions in the Americas, growing beans, corn, and squash together. They help each other grow. It's amazing, and they provide complementary nutrients. It's beautiful, okay? 10% of, grain mass protein, so it's good. We have the Canada's Food Guide, which is now talking about planetary health as well as human health. So this is good, okay? And the Lancet Eat Commission, which is the Lancet medical journal from the UK, one of the top medical journals, talking about planetary health and also talking about, human health worldwide. And how do you feed a population of 10 billion, because we're going to get to 10 billion and we're going to go beyond too. But how do you do that without destroying everything on Earth? How do you feed everybody? And so we're talking about plant shifting. So major organizations, governments, Lancet, are talking out in favor of this. It's a good time to start talking about it, okay? So whole food, plant-based diet, it's good for us. There's many factors. We talked about the different types of food. Remember, some plant foods are actually not good for the environment either. It doesn't mean that every single plant food, that's another discussion altogether. And they have different resourcing paths for different kinds of food. And the other food and human rights, things like chocolate, fair trade chocolate, organic bananas, that's a human rights issue as well. There's other workers' rights. And we're talking about getting outside of our own bubble. Now, this was a depressing kind of talk in a lot of ways, right? Because the stats aren't really that good, okay? And they're getting worse, unfortunately, they are. But we can make a difference. Now, nothing is set in stone, it's not determined what's going to happen. The hard part is that everybody lives, like we live in Toronto, somebody lives in their place, everybody lives in their place, everybody has their own day-to-day concerns. We kind of live in our own bubble. And then people have their concerns of their own bubble. I have a lot of friends that went, they paid like, $10,000 to see the Raptors, so go Raptors, it's great. But people make choices to buy all kinds of luxuries instead of supporting what's happening with the global poor or those kind of things. These are ethical choices. But most people think it's a waste of time, or they don't even want to talk about it. Like, who cares? You know what I mean? Yeah, I saw something, you know, maybe I sent $100 to somebody, you know, but who to send it to? You know, the thing is that we have to be able to, if we arm ourselves with the knowledge, I think there's two things. One, we understand the statistics, and when you look at the numbers, the basic fundamental numbers, it's not really refutable. People can't BS with you about those numbers. Those are the numbers. So you have a solid argument to present. Secondly, it can present to other people what the scale of the matter really is, because people don't know the idea of scale. We see lots of stuff in the news, but we don't understand the scale realistically. So when you present people the numbers, and I want to make these things available for everybody, then we can become advocates to show people, okay, what it is that we're really dealing with and what it is we really need to do. It becomes much more clear when you can look at the story through numbers, not just all the stuff that's on the news, oh, there's some wildfires here and this and that. Let's look at these basic numbers and understand the scale. Your argument becomes kind of irrefutable if you know the numbers and know the sources that they come from. And we need to get people out of their bubbles, because, you know, for compassion to humans, to animals, to the environment, for our own health, for planetary health, things start making sense when you see the bigger picture and you have these solid building blocks to explain to yourself and to others. So this compassion becomes a thing. In this world where we're getting increasingly busy, and despite we're more connected by the internet and Facebook, we're kind of also less connected, you know? And we need to reverse that a little bit. We need to get more connected, and I think this is a big deal, right? So conclusion, plant diet is fundamental to sustainability, okay? And it's on par with things like fossil fuel use in the materials economy and energy economy and stuff like that, okay? Giving us, you know, but eating plant-based doesn't give us a free pass for our flights or a big house or a big car, whatever we want. You know, it's not like that. It's not trade. It's more complex, but we don't have time. And we want to look at these things in context of other issues: social justice, women's rights, population, environmental economics, governance, peace and war industry. Make note, it's an industry. Canada has this multi-billion-dollar weapons deal with Saudi and other weapons deals and stuff like that. This is big business. War is an industry. And other forms of overconsumption. Animal agriculture is bad for the environment because it overconsumes. And we also overconsume a lot of other things. It's good to know how much we consume of energy and materials, clothing, and all the other things that are part of our materials economy. You know, so it's a part of overconsumption. You have to look at it in the context of that as well. So thank you very much. And I want to put a, here's a TED talker that we should know about, you know, and you know, she's pretty amazing, and maybe she will win the Nobel Prize, and I think that she should, you know. Thank you very much for being here.